Hello everyone, and welcome back to our Quest and Dialog system in Godot 4 and GDScript. In this video, we will set up our project and we will create our NPC and Quest Item entities. Without any further dilly-dallying, let's get started. Now, I'm going to be using my 2D base project for this series, so if you want to follow along using that, you can come along with me to my Ko-fi page and download the template. I will leave the links to the base project, resources, and the sectional code for every video in the description box below. So let's go ahead and download the base project. Whilst that is downloading, let's have a look at the GitHub repository that I created for this project. It is here where you can find the sectional code for each video and the credits for all of the assets that we will be using in our project. You can also find the link here for the Excalibur board that we used in the previous video, which contains the different flowcharts that break up our system. So, with our project downloaded, let's unzip the folder and open up the project. You'll see in this project that we have a simple map and a player character in the main scene. If we run our game, we should be able to move this player around using our arrow keys. Now, before we dive into the NPC and Quest Item entity creation, we will first have to modify our player character to be able to interact with these entities. To do this, we will make use of a Raycast 2D node. The Raycast 2D node allows us to collide with and detect collisions that are along a line or a ray. Our player will use this node to emit a ray or a line from their body. As they move around the world, this ray will hit everything that the player is colliding with. During these hits, it will check if the entities that the player is colliding with are our NPC or our Quest item. If we are hitting our NPC, we should be able to talk to the NPC. And if we are hitting our Quest item, we should be able to pick it up if it is currently needed for an active quest. So, in your player scene, let's add a new Raycast 2D node. Now, in the inspector panel, you will see that it can collide with two types of collisions, areas and bodies. We'll need to enable both because our NPC will be part of a physics body node which belongs to the bodies category, and our quest item will be part of an area 2D node which belongs to the areas category. So let's go ahead and enable both these options. To be able to see this raycast during runtime for testing, let's enable visible collisions underneath the debugging menu. If you run your game now, you will see that the raycast is there, but it's not moving with our player's direction. We need it to face the direction that our player is looking at. To do this, we will need to set the Raycast 2D node's target position property to be relative to our player's direction. So, in our script, let's set our Raycast to face our player's direction. From the code, you can see that we first set the raycast to face our direction using velocity.normalized, and then we multiply it by 50. This value of 50 determines the length of our raycast. So if you want it to be longer or shorter, you should change this value. If we run our game now, the raycast should move in the direction that the player is facing, and it should be 50 units long. The next thing that we need to do is to create an autoload singleton script so that we can have a single reference of our player component throughout our system. If you've never worked with an autoload singleton before, it's basically a special kind of script that's always loaded and always accessible, no matter which scene is currently running or open in your game. We use this script to define global variables, methods, or even entire nodes that can then be instantly accessed in any other script. In my tutorials, I always just have one autoload script, and I like to call it global.gd. But on a bigger scale, you won't just have one autoload script. You can have one for just your quest system, your saving and loading system, your inventory system, etc. So just know that just because I have one autoload script doesn't mean that you can only have one autoload script. Okay, so in our project, underneath our scripts folder, let's create a new script called global. We'll need to make this an autoload script so that it can be accessed everywhere. So in your project settings window, navigate to globals. You will see that there is an option to add a new component. Add your new global script to this list so that whenever we create a function or variable within the script, we can easily access it everywhere. Okay, so like I said, in the script, we need a player reference. In my other tutorials, our global script is usually a lot more involved, but for this system, we will use the global script to purely have a constant reference to our player entity. So in our script, let's create a new reference to our player entity. We set this node reference to be null in our global script because we will initialize this player reference in the player script. We do it this way to ensure that the player node is fully initialized before being referenced globally. Okay, so let's go ahead and initialize this variable in our player script. And that is our player set up. Now we can move on to our NPC. We will have a single NPC scene that can be instanced multiple times to create many different NPCs with different names, quests, and dialogues. Now, I want to give you a forewarning that all of my NPCs and my player will look the same because I only have one sprite sheet. This means that unfortunately my world will be like a nudist beach filled with the same naked bald character. But if you have different sprites or sprite sheets, please give them to your NPCs to give them some personality. Okay, so to create our NPC, we will start by duplicating our player scene and renaming it to NPC. In this scene, let's rename the root node from player to NPC. Also delete the camera and raycast nodes and detach the player script from the scene. So we know that this is an NPC, but our game will not know what this entity is. To be able to identify the NPCs in our world, we will need to add our NPC scene to a group. By using a group, we can help our player's raycast node see that it is currently interacting with an NPC. So let's add our NPC to an NPC group. Okay, now our game will be able to see that this is an NPC, but because I'm using the same bald man character, I won't be able to see that this is an NPC. So, just to further separate the NPC from the player, I'm going to add an exclamation mark above their head using a label node. If you want to do the same, change the color to be red and the font size to be 25 pixels. Now we'll be able to identify our NPC. The last thing that we need to do is attach a new script to our NPC and give our NPC some values to determine their structure. So let's attach a new script to our scene and we'll save it underneath our scripts folder. In this script, we will for now just give our NPC a name and an ID. The ID will be used by our system to do logic checks and quest and dialog assignments, and the name will be shown visually in our dialog panel when our player interacts with our NPC. We exported these variables so that we can add the values for each unique and individual NPC in the inspector panel. So, if you check the inspector panel, you can see that you can enter a name and an ID for your NPC. And so we have our NPC set up for now. Let's move on to our quest item. Just like with our NPC, we will create a single scene that can be instanced many different times to represent many different items. Let's create a new scene called Quest Item with an Area 2D node as its root node. You'll see that we get a yellow warning because we need to add a collision shape. So let's add a collision shape 2D node with a simple circle shape to our area 2D. Finally, we'll need a way of being able to visually see the item. Let's add a Sprite 2D node, and you can give this Sprite 2D any texture you want. We'll also add our quest item to a group called items so that our raycast can detect it as a quest item entity. The last thing that we need to do is attach a script to our scene. So let's add a new script to our scene and we'll save the script in our scripts folder. In this script, we will start off by giving our quest item an ID, quantity, and an icon. The ID is the identifier, the quantity is how much of this item will be added to the player's inventory when picked up, and the icon is the visual representation of the item. We'll also get an onReady reference to our Sprite2D node so that we can assign the icon texture to the node. We need to assign our icon texture to our Sprite2D node, but we want to show the icon both in the editor and in the game during runtime. Currently, if we just give the Sprite2D node the texture that we assign to it in the inspector panel, we will have to run the game each time we want to see if the icon is being set. To fix this, we will need to make use of the @tool component, which will allow us to execute our code while we are in the editor and not just in the game. Now if we assign a texture to our quest item via the icon property, it should show both in the editor and in the game. Let's test this by instancing our quest item in our main scene. We can also go ahead and instance our NPC in our main scene. And that is it for our setup section. In the next part, we will start by adding our interaction functionality so that we can see if the player can detect whether they're interacting with an NPC or a Quest item. That's it for me. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next one.